I spilled some tea on my desk. Oh no. Oh no. What kind of wine goes with moon cheese? That's a really good question. I appreciate that question. What kind of wine would go with moon cheese? Huh. Yo, what up? Happy Tuesday, everybody. Who's awake? Not me. Not this guy. What's going up? My hair's getting long. Look at that. Oh boy. Time to chop it all off. Venus wine. Mushroom draught. Moon mushroom draught. It's making me think of the Dungeons and Dragons cookbook. Which there's still a couple days. Like, I need to try more of that. People keep asking me to do a cooking stream. How would you guys feel if I did the, I don't make enough money for that, let's be real. I really don't. I don't, that's not, there's, But it would be fun. It might be fun to just go through that book, but I don't really want to, I don't want to advertise for WotC because they hired the Pinkertons, and like, you're the bad guy. Like, you're the bad guy forever. Like, you can't unhire the Pinkertons. You can't just undo that. I mean, I guess I could do it, say that that's what it is, and thus, by doing so, incidentally publishes all the recipes. So so then they don't make any, like, people don't have to buy the book, I guess? I don't know. Kind of insidious, isn't it? Oh, my bagel popped. Oh shit, that was the wrong button. No, that's definitely the wrong button. Oh no, oh no. Oh no, oh, my bagel just popped. I'm getting a bagel. Make stuff from the Redwall cookbook. There's a Redwall cookbook? I loved Redwall as a kid. Yeah, alright, that's good enough. I didn't know there was a Redwall cookbook. That's pretty cool. Alright, that should be fine. You wouldn't download a car. You wouldn't download a car! So dumb, man. Yeah, don't mind me. I guess I just kind of walked away. I'm hungry. Anti-piracy ad that makes it look You wouldn't make an anti-piracy ad that makes it look super cool. It's when there's somebody working in the background, you know what I mean? When there's like, you know what I'm talking about? When there's like somebody, you know, there's like a guy, somebody's like an insider, somebody's like fucking doing some shit. You know what? I should ask Dr. Dam to come on and talk to me about Jon Snow. Because, at least for this unit that we've been covering, They seem like really into this guy. And I don't quite get it, like, if that's like legit, if that's like the overarching vibe of the community, or if they're just like a niche group. Like, Dr. Dan's in that field, right? They used a pirated font for the anti-piracy badge. Did they? I believe you. I believe you without question. I mean, that is true. This Jon Snow definitely does know some things. I'm eating this bagel before we start, so if you're looking for a timer, if you're watching this in the future and you're looking for a start time, after I'm done this bagel. You know, apparently, I found a CTV news article yesterday. Shut up. That the Vatican is expected to return indigenous artifacts to Canada. I do love me a good bagel. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna pretend. Who am I kidding? I love bagels. You guys ever had a pumpernickel bagel? I ate a ton of those when I was a kid. I ate them until I hated them. I actually don't want this tea right now. What I actually want is a tall glass of orange juice. Anyway, indigenous communities in Canada are preparing for the return of sacred artifacts that have been held in the Vatican for over 100 years. Since 1925, the Vatican City's museum has held thousands of sacred cultural artifacts that belong to indigenous peoples. In a few weeks, it is expected that the Vatican will announce the return of dozens of these items, which will eventually make their way back by to Canada by year's end. So they've held thousands of sacred artifacts that belong to indigenous peoples, but they're only going to return dozens of them? What happened to the no stealing thing? Well, I will provide you guys the playlist I'm listening to right now. This thing has yet to get copyright struck for me, so hey, take that for what you will. This song in particular that we're on right now is at Apartment 102 from Kirby's Epic Yarn. But the transfer won't be straightforward. Yeah, fucking of course. According to Cody Grote, an assistant professor of history and indigenous studies at Western University, these artifacts are expected to be transferred from the Vatican to Canada Conference of Catholic Bishops, CCCB, with the Canadian Museum of History expected to be serving as a type of intermediary. So the Vatican's letting them out of the Vatican, but giving them to other Catholics in Canada. Okay, is this not insulting? Is this not like an insulting endeavor? That is like, listen, we're gonna give your stuff back, but not really. We're just gonna give it back to the people that represent the group that was genociding you when we took them in the first place. Like, is that we have thousands of them, but we're gonna give you like, you know, half a dozen. Like, is that not, it's, I feel like I'm the kind of person that I would rather just not get any of them back at that point. A tall glass of OJ, so a mega pint. Yeah. They rented a room in their loot vault. Want to really get insulting, go to the British Museum. I mean, yeah, the British Museum is, like, notorious, but, I mean, it's not like the Vatican's any better. Like, the Vatican and the British Museum have gotta be, like, I feel like that, like, you'd have to do a tour of both of them and, like, take notes, and then I wonder if there's somebody, I wonder if I could pull somebody in. I wonder if I know somebody who's, like, either been to the Vatican or has studied the Vatican or has been to the British Museum or has studied the British Museum enough that they could give us, they could come on and give us a comprehensive debate about whether the Vatican is holding more stolen shit in worse ways, or if the British Museum is holding more stolen shit in worse ways. Like, would you rather? This is like a really fucked up game of would you rather. Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse Nepanak described the items as, quote, living sacred pieces of our culture and ceremonies, and said that they must be treated as the invaluable objects that they are. In an interview with CTV Your Morning on Monday, Grote explained that the artifacts and archival documents the Vatican has in its collection relate to an exhibit that took place in 1925. Quote, as part of that exhibit, a catalog was published listing specific artifacts, Grote said. Quote, that's sort of our starting point for this process, is the items listed in the catalog, and from there we'll see what else might be in the collection. See, this makes a little bit more sense to me, like, just sending it to the Vatican, okay, I'm riffing on that they're sending back dozens, right? Like, I'm riffing on that. Obviously, they're not gonna send back thousands all at once. They're gonna have to send them in, like, chunks. They're not just gonna, like, airdrop. You know what I mean? So they're gonna, like, as long as that's the process, I'm not convinced about, like, what was the name of the group? The CCCB? The Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops. I'm not convinced that they should be the end point of where these things end up. I don't mind if they end up being a stopping off point. Like, listen, we're gonna send these to you. We're gonna put them in your care to make sure that they then go to where they need to go after that. That I'd be fine with. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Cash is just sitting in the account? What? That's crazy. Vatican plans to transfer the artifacts to the CCCB. It's is intentional, Grote said, as they don't want to set a precedent as an institution or as a state wait, hold on, what's this word? Repater. I can't read. There are words. I feel like I'm gonna hear this word. I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, no.
Repatriate.
Repatriate. No, I've never heard the word repatriate before. I know what it means. Repatriate. Repatriating items to descendant communities. So the CCCB will then donate the items back to the institution. Okay, yes, yeah, so that's what I said, remember? Remember, just a second ago, I was like, it doesn't make sense unless, like this is bullshit. Unless this is a stopping off point and then it's gonna go out from there. That makes sense. The Vatican's, like, reasoning leaves a little bit to be wanting of them just being shitheads. But whatever. Sometimes, like, beggars can't be choosers sometimes. And sometimes things are a process. And it's just like, you know what? Fine. Baby steps. We'll take it. However, what that will look like will remain to be seen. Yeah. Yeah. Grote stressed that in all points of the process, Indigenous nations need to be involved in discussions as there will be challenges to face. Yes. Quote, it's hard to clearly identify which descendant community these cultural items belong to because when they were taken from the community, that respect wasn't really given to label them accordingly. Yeah. Grote said that, from his understanding, the items will go to the Canadian Museum of History, and there will be a process of consultation. He added that it's worth noting the museum, which is a Crown corporation, has been working to repatriate some items itself. So yeah, the Canadian Museum of History has been trying and like putting in an effort to rectify things and get things sent back to where they belong and where they needed to go. I wonder how much shit they actually have. It's more than likely almost exclusively like Inuit and indigenous people stuff. Canada didn't do a whole ton of like running around the world conquering everybody and taking their shit. Not that we wouldn't or we're better than anybody else. I don't mean that. It's just that we weren't born in that time. So, yeah. It's gonna be complicated. Quote, it can seem like a valid step to have these go to an institution like the Canadian Museum of History as an intermediary, as long as we recognize that the institution is also engaging in these reparation dialogues. And it's not where it necessarily needs to be either, Grote said. While the process is expected to be long and slow, it will also be a valid process as one that some may feel long overdue. Yeah. I think this is, I think ultimately this ends up being a good thing. I think the people who study Indigenous history, and the Canadian Museum of History will get to, like, learn a lot through the process of, like, doing all the identification and recognizing this and finding that and getting this all together. I think the process will be, if we do it right, is beneficial. And I think at the end of the day, like, as long as we're not going to pretend the Canadian Museum of History... I agree, I think Grote makes a really good point. As long as we're not pretending that the Canadian Museum of History isn't problematic and isn't in the process of fixing its own issues, then it should be okay, because then we're not pretending that they're acting like some kind of fucking heroes that are like, oh, we're gonna save the day, and let's just sweep under the rug all of our problematic shit. So as long as they're not doing that, it should probably be okay. Yeah, I've heard the Vatican is beautiful. Anyway, I just saw this and I thought it was interesting and wanted to share. That's all. Steps in the right direction. Not everything is bad news all the time, I guess. Oh, Pete Hoekstra said some dumb shit about Canada again. He said that Canada burned the bridges. Meanwhile, Canadians are like, okay, yuck, we do it again. It's one of those things where, like, you went to the Vatican 3 weeks ago? That's pretty cool. Feline's been to the Vatican? I wonder if there is a comprehensive comparison between the Vatican and the British Museum. I'd be curious to know. I don't know if there is. If you think there might be, let me know. I think one of the things that at least this administration, or like the media that is talking about this administration, like the Trump administration, doesn't really get about the vibe in Canada. Again, this isn't every single Canadian. This is just a vibe that is the general national who gives a fuck. Is that we don't fucking care. Like, we do not care if Donald Trump wants to blame Canada for everything. We're just like, okay, give us the credit for it. Fine. If Donald Trump and his lackeys want to say that, oh, it's Canada's fault, oh, Canada burned bridges with the United States, then we're just gonna be like, okay. Yes, and? I wonder what Jesus would think if he saw a palace of marble and gold built in his name. I think we know what Jesus would think. Isn't there like in the New Testament, isn't there like a whole shtick where he like spends hours braiding a whip and then beats the shit out of everybody? I'm pretty sure that's a story. I think that's in there somewhere. feel like that's probably would be his reaction. I think that might be what he would do. Maybe I'm wrong. What did Hoekstra actually say, though? That's just the title. Let's see. Oh, wait. U.S. ambassador doubts tariff deal feasible before the new year. 100 deals in 100 days, guys. Come on. The U.S. ambassador to Canada doesn't foresee a new security and economic deal between Canada and the United States, which could see the reduction or full removal of tariffs amid the ongoing trade dispute before the new year. Quote, "We have stopped negotiations with Canada," Pete Hoekstra said in a keynote address to the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers and Business Canada on Monday. Quote, "I don't see any way that there will be an agreement before American Thanksgiving." Quote, "I'm not sure what it's going to take to get people back to the table in a constructive and positive mode," he added. Well, you know, maybe your tantrum in chief should, like, you know, slow his roll and chill the fuck out. Stop being mad about things that Reagan said. Hoekstra's comments came just days after U.S. President Donald Trump said he is terminating trade talks with Canada and increasing levies on Canadian goods by 10%. I think that's what are we at then? Are we at 20% or are we at 40%? Does anybody know what the current fucking tariffs even are right now? This is like the US putting the flames to the bridge and then hands over a torch to Canada and claims that they must be the ones to make concessions or something. Or something. In response to an anti-tariff ad by the government of Ontario, which featured the voice of former Republican U.S. President Ronald Reagan, featured the voice of, yeah, it's a recording of fucking Reagan. Ontario has since pulled the ads, effective Monday. Yeah, and then Doug Ford bragged about it. He was like, hey, it got the job done. The whole point was to get people talking about what Reagan actually said, and it worked. Troll, lol. He basically went on a fucking, like, he's been interviewed, like, people have asked him about it, and basically his face turns into the old school troll face. Government sources has told CTV News that Canadian officials were hopeful that there could be movement on steel and aluminum deal by this week's APEC summit in South Korea. And speaking to reports on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit in Malaysia on Monday, Prime Minister Mark Carney said talks, quote, had been making progress on affected sectors like steel and aluminum until the Ontario anti-tariff ad created waves. Do you think Carney cares? Like, do you think that Mark Carney is irritated at Doug Ford, you mean? Like, does Carney think he was actually making any real progress with Donald Trump and then was like, ah, shit. I don't think so. It doesn't seem that way to me. Because Carney's administration and cabinet seems pretty straightforward. I think if they were irritated at Doug Ford doing this, they would say so. I think they'd be like, hey, this is problematic. Get out of our way. Okay, fair. Who isn't irritated at Doug Ford? Okay, fair enough, but I meant, like, about this particular thing. No. The ad amounts to foreign interference. That's very funny. The Great Smog of London in 1952? I don't know what that is. Hold on. Let me pull that up. Doug Ford is the premier of Ontario, and to give, like, a, equation, like, an equated, like, he's basically, like, a governor of a state. It's not quite the same, he doesn't quite fill the same role, but it's, like, in the hierarchy, that's basically the role he plays. He's the governor of Ontario. Except he's not called the governor, he's called a premier. Because his job is a little bit different, because our political structure, our governmental, I shouldn't say political structure, our government structure is different in Canada than it is in the United States. But governor would be like the closest thing. He's like a head of state. Really bad air pollution that killed a couple of thousand people in a week. The Great Smog of London, or the Great Smog of 1952, was a severe air pollution event that affected London, England in December of 1952. We've jumped 100 years. Because the cholera outbreak was in 1852, or 1843, right? A period of unusually cold weather combined with an anticyclone and windless conditions collected airborne pollutants, mostly arising from the use of coal, to form a thick layer of smog over the city. It lasted from Friday the 5th of December to Tuesday the 9th of December of 1952, and then dispersed quickly when the weather changed. The smog caused major disruption by reducing visibility and even penetrating indoor areas, far more severely than previous smog events, called pea supers. That's a bad name. Government medical records in the weeks following the event estimated that up to 4,000 people had died as a direct result of the smog, and 100,000 more were made ill by the smog's effects on the human respiratory tract. That makes sense. More recent research suggests that the total number of fatalities was considerably greater, with estimates between 10,000 and 12,000 deaths. London's poor air quality has been a problem since at least the 13th century. The diarist John Evelyn had written about, quote, the inconvenience of the air and smoke of London in the first book written about air pollution in 1661. 1661? Guys, we knew about pollution in 1661. We are in the year of our Lord 2025. Can we please do something about this? However, the Great Smog was many times worse than anything the city had ever experienced before. It is thought to be the worst air pollution event in the history of the United Kingdom, and the most significant for its effect on environmental research, government regulation, and public awareness of the relationship between air quality and health. It led to several changes in practices and regulations, including the Clean Air Act of 1956. Neat. Oh, did I misread? This as 20,000 and it should be 12,000? Sorry, my bad. Thank you for correcting me. Read up for the tariffs. Oh, okay. 10% from April, Canada is exempt. Additional 40% when unspecified. Additional tariffs of unspecified percentage when it is digital service, 10% for energy, 35% for other products, 40% on transshipment, and 250% on dairy and lumber. Then there's an additional unknown percent from June, and now another 10% from October. Oh my god, oh, and 25% surcharge on tariffs from automobile stuff. So, the tariffs are currently at question mark percent. That's pretty cool. Alright, I'm finished my bagel. I'm gonna do something real quick. Hold on. I'm just gonna put this on. Don't mind this. I'm putting this up for a second so that way later I can find out when the fuck I start. I'm just gonna count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, that's long enough. Alright, back to this. It took them about almost 300 years to finally pass an anti-smog act. From 1600 to 1950, what did I say? 56? And it took that many years, and it took upwards of 12,000 people dying in, like, a very, like, aggressive event. Like, an aggressive, obvious, we literally cannot ignore this no matter how hard we tried. Fascinating. Alright. PredictionX, Jon Snow and the Cholera Outbreak of 1854. This video below is a full-length interview with Dr. Don Goldman. It touches on 3 distinct topics. An introduction to PredictionX, an overview of Don's work at the Institute of Healthcare Improvement, and a discussion about Jon Snow and his relationship to modern epidemiology. Epidemiology. Okay, there we go. I did it. God, it's been a couple of days. Alright, you guys ready? We get a video today. Let's go. I hope this video is going to be better than the other one.
So you asked me before what this course potentially has to do with ice cores and climate change, and how is that connected to epidemiology, which I want to ask you about today. So when I was young, I was a summer intern at the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies at Columbia University, where they had a summer intern program that 7 or 8 of the
Okay, I'm trying to turn the closed captioning on, but it is not.
interns were all interested in earth science, and 3 of us were interested in astrophysics. And they had the same set of mini courses for all of us. And lucky me, so the mini courses were about earth science and astrophysics. The person teaching those courses was James Hansen. Does his name mean anything to you? He's like the world's leading expert on climate change simulation. But in 1983...
I've absolutely definitely heard of him.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just had a moment.
No, it's okay. Anyway, so in 1983, he was not so well known. He was in the small community of paleoclimate. Okay, but he had just started trying to apply these models of the ancient atmosphere to the future, to taking modern data and then predicting the future. And he started to see, he and his colleagues started to see that it potentially predicted this disastrous climate change. And at that point, they were not sure of this. And unfortunately, those are the simulations that George W. Bush used to quote in the, 2000s of, well, yeah, these scientists aren't really sure. There's a lot of uncertainty around these climate change predictions.
Yeah, that's the problem with when you're talking about knowledge and certainty, and when you're talking about, when you say I'm uncertain about my prediction, what do you mean? Do you mean you're uncertain about your prediction because you don't even know something is happening? Or you're uncertain because there are a handful of variables that will make it difficult to predict an exact outcome, right? And that's the difference. And this is the problem with language, right? And this is why science communication is important. It's not easy to communicate science to people who don't know the science when you are somebody highly educated in the science. It's what is it called? The is it the curse of knowledge? And it's basically like, listen, I know these things, and I can't unknow these things, so it makes it difficult for me to explain this to you like you're 5. But in my opinion, I think the better you understand something, the easier of a time you should have communicating it to a toddler. If you can't communicate it to a toddler, how do you know you really know what you know? Because you should understand the concepts thoroughly enough that you're able to bring the conversation to a level that you can explain it with crayons. Then again, also, not everybody is good at communication, right? So, honestly, that also needs to be taken into account, that some people just are not good at communicating, either verbally or in written format, because that's also a thing too. Like, some people are good at giving presentations but not good at conversation, and some people are good at writing in certain formats but not good at speaking at others, right? Some people might be good at doing like somebody might be good at TED Talk but not be good at a YouTube channel, right? These are a wholly different themes, and you also have to know who your audience is. Who are you talking to? There's a big difference. And last time we were watching the other two people talk, and we were complaining that some of the verbiage they were using and the way they were discussing these things made it really, really easy for people who don't understand, or people who are malicious in misrepresenting science and misrepresenting what's going on, that a lot of what they were saying could easily be taken and utilized that way. But these were two scientists talking to each other, not two scientists trying to communicate to a group of people. But with the exception that this is on their Harvard PredictionX program, which is them trying to communicate and educate people. Right, so it's something that needs to sort of be taken into consideration. It's part of that whole idea of how much are you actually taking into account everything that's going on around you when you're communicating. And yes, there's a difference between education and communication, right? Communicating science to the masses has a degree of education in it, like it's part of educating. But there's a difference between doing that and being in a literal classroom where you can take the time to be wrong and then redirect and correct things, or use being wrong as an example for something else, right? There's like... Question is, though, at what level do they educate at? University level because it's Harvard, or high school level, or otherwise? Yeah, I don't know what the level, like, what this is considered. Right? I have no idea where you would place this. So, your guess is as good as mine.
But they were from the 80s when they first started doing this work, and of course by the 2000s they were very sure. And so the origins of this course were to try to explain to the public, as the sort of ultimate goal of the course, why computer modeling, computer simulation is so important in kind of the way we make decisions in modern.
Well, there, she just answered our question. The goal of the course is to communicate why prediction modeling, the history of prediction modeling, and why it's important. To communicate to everybody else why these things matter. I don't know if this course is very good at doing that. I mean, if you're interested in it, sure. I've learned things. I've found it interesting. But I don't know if I would put this on PBS. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'd put this on TVO. Right? Like, I don't know about that.
Society. And so the three areas where I think that's the most important, that are all interrelated, are climate change, finance, and epidemiology.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so you sort of have health, wealth, and the health of the world, if you will.
Well, finance is interesting. You know that all of the actuarial methods that we use now to sell life insurance were developed based on a prediction of how long monks would live in Scotland.
I did not know that.
Yes, the idea was, okay, these monks are getting old, they're going to retire, we want to make sure we don't go bankrupt taking care of these now non-productive monks.
Yeah.
So very accurate predictions were made as to how much money they should put aside so they could support the monks.
When was that?
Oh, way back there when there were monks.
I think there are still monks.
There may be, but they're,
anyway.
They're better provided for or something
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
But this was novel.
All right, well, now I have to go and fucking look up monks in Scotland. Excuse me. Monks in Scotland. What was that? Life insurance? Modeling? What? This is Napoleon. What is this? What is this? Where are you sending me, guy whose voice doesn't match his face? How am I... The concept of life insurance for religious communities in Scotland, particularly monks, can be traced back to the foundational work of two Church of Scotland ministers, Robert Wallace and Alexander Webster, in 1744. What? Fucking what? Really? Alright. I don't know if that's accurate. I don't know if that's... Okay, I guess.
At the time.
No, I did not know that. Yeah. But certainly...
So roughly 1744 is the time period they're talking about, I guess.
Right. I mean, but there's a perfect connection between health and wealth, right? Is that people are
return to monk.
Always trying to make these predictions about how long a lifespan is and what to expect in terms of the mix of people and how much health care they're going to need. And so that actually brings me...
Hey, don't dunk on sheep herders. Sheep herders did good fucking science. Good fucking science, all right? Those motherfuckers did biological evolution, farming shit. They did, like, fucking weather shit. They did, like, navigational shit. They did all kinds of shit. Don't dunk on sheep herders, man. Those motherfuckers, like, made it so that we could be a lot of the things we are now.
So you said, why are we going to London? Okay, so the middle part of this course is, well, let me back up. The end goal of the course is to get to the point of how humans predict their future today, right? So in other words, we make these big computer models and we input data about what we know, and we take ideas about how we think systems work, and then we sort of push this data through to the future, and we look at what those systems predict, and then we see how well we do year to year, and we adjust the predictions. And so that's kind of a system that people are familiar with, but they don't really know what the parts are called or how it all works. And so
they're fairly cynical about it because they see how often predictions are incorrect, be it the weather or what's going to happen to the stock market.
I'm so glad you mentioned the weather. There's actually an application for the course that's an iPhone app that we made for the course to demonstrate exactly this point. That's called Take a Sweater. It's called Take a Sweater on your iPhone. You can go get it. And it shows you the Boston weather forecast with uncertainty. And the uncertainty is based on how good the predictions were in the past under similar circumstances to what's predicted for the immediate
future. Can I ask you?
Okay, that's fun. That's a fun app, right? Can we get that globally? Can we, like, because that's like, how accurate is the weather prediction if you were to predict it on X date, like in X year? That's fun. That should be a back to D&D again. You should use that for your D&D game.
A question about this? Can we just have a conversation?
Yeah, of course.
So I've noticed that unlike in previous times, hurricane predicted tracks have confidence intervals around them.
They have cones of uncertainty.
And what I want to know is, do most people understand what that means? Because when I asked Rob Liu, who's quite famous around here for his stewardship of Harvard X, whether he felt the average Harvard freshman would have a basic understanding of probability, he said probably not. So when people look at that, does it have the same meaning for them as it has
to us? I'm so glad you asked me that.
No, I don't think that scientists use terms within their own communities that are the same as the general populace uses, even if the people happen to be also scientists. Like, just because you're a scientist doesn't mean you don't use words and terminology colloquially. Right? If I say the word random, there's a difference between I'm talking to you guys when I'm talking about what I'm doing, because you know that when I'm saying, oh, something is random, I'm saying it within X, Y, and Z spec. Whereas if I say random and I'm out at the bar and I'm like, oh, this song is so random, I'm not using the term the same way. Right? It's just not the same contextual basis. So even if a scientist goes out into the world and touches some grass and they say the word, oh, I'm not sure about that, or I'm uncertain, they're not using the term the same way as they are when they're writing a paper, right? The uncertainty is referencing something particular that has to do with it. Yeah, the word theory comes to mind. The word faith comes to mind as well. So if you get and there are words that are like that, that sort of cross these arbitrary lines and demarcation lines that we put between topics, right? Hi, welcome. Hello, hi, hello, hi. So I don't think if you're using the term uncertainty and you're talking about predictions and you're talking about prediction modeling, which basically means you're talking about mathematics, you're talking about that space between of like, well, it could be between here and here, right? Now, that's not always going to be the case. There are going to be more particulars about depending on what exactly you're talking about. But if I say, okay, listen, I'm going to roll this d20, I can say I'm uncertain what the number is going to be, but I know the number will be between 1 and 20. So how uncertain am I? Right? And then I could say, well, there's a 1 in 20 chance that I roll a 14. But I'm not certain that I'm going to get a 14, right? I didn't do it. Wasn't me. I didn't knock anything over. I don't know what you're talking about.
Because I have a whole group full of average Harvard freshmen, because there's a freshman seminar called Prediction that's being taught in conjunction with this course to gauge the answer to questions exactly like that. And I showed them hurricane maps exactly like that. Wow. And I asked them the question that you just asked. And almost all of them did know what that meant.
Really?
So you can be a little bit reassured. And part of the reason is because there are a lot of kinds of predictions that really connect to people's individual lives. And I think that people invest the time to try to figure out what they mean. And so if you're looking at a map and you see this swath of color that maybe is going to encompass some town where you live or where you know somebody where they live, you wonder what it is and you try to figure it out.
So when the nightly news says 25 million Americans...
Sableye says, more interesting, roll 20d20 and what's the probability you get between 210 and 240? Or do you mean 210, 240? So that's like, when you start talking about statistics and probability, that's a different course that I'm hoping we're going to get to eventually, but it is not this day. So, take that, put a pin in that, and we're going to talk about that when we get there.
Americans in the path of destruction.
They don't connect how many people are in that cone.
Yeah,
I think
that's what I figured.
No, that level of sophistication, no. But do they know, do they know that that's the 1 sigma uncertainty, or do they think it's just sort of some estimate, which 1 sigma kind of is? But no. But they know.
My brother in Christ, you're using the term 1 sigma. I assure you that the average person does not know what the fuck you're talking about when you say 1 sigma uncertainty. I promise. If you sat down and took the time to explain to them what the term meant, they might be able to keep up. And they might understand what you mean, but if you just say that, no, they're not considering that in the bubble that we're speaking in.
So that it's something about, well, the hurricane could go that way or that way somewhere between.
So since we're speaking about this and just having a grand old time because we know each other, you may wonder why I'm so interested in ice and weather. It's because, like you, I had an experience over a summer where I studied the origin of hailstones with Vincent Schaefer, who invented cloud seeding at Loomis School in Connecticut. Okay. And I had hailstones from Grand Island, Nebraska that were about that big.
Frozen.
And of course. Yeah. Otherwise they would not be.
They wouldn't be hailstones if they weren't frozen. What?
Hail nor stone. He had the idea that you should do your research with as little equipment as humanly possible. So what I had was a little microtome saw. I had velvet. I had a liquid plastic, and I had a string and a freezer. Okay. That was all I had. And so I learned that if you cut through a hailstone and you rub it with velvet, where there are impurities, the melting point's different, and you etch the crystals. And then if you put paraffin over it, you can remove the paraffin when the hailstone turns into a little puddle of water, and you can study that under a microscope and see the structure of a hailstone.
Wow. And when was this?
It was way back then when I was in high school, actually, some long time ago.
Wow, okay. So that's even before my story, which was
it could
just
be.
College. Wow. Wow, okay. Wow. Yeah. So, right. It's weird how people get interested in things like this. And what's weirder is, I'm glad you asked about the hurricanes, because I think a lot of people don't think about where estimates of uncertainty come from. And so a lot of the goal of this last part of the course, which is not what we're really going to be talking about in a few minutes, but a lot of it is so that when people hear, for example, well, we're not sure about climate change and whether the temperature is going to go up, 2 degrees per century or 4 degrees per century, they don't hear the we're not sure between 2 degrees and 4 degrees. They just hear the we're not sure. And then they're like, oh, well, I don't have to worry about it because people are uncertain.
Yeah.
And then
I think that's a fair assessment. I think that's a kind assessment to say that like people are only catching certain parts and not understanding the whole, and that there's a problem that people don't understand that. I don't like. I guess I can appreciate that they're trying to do something about it by making these courses and making them accessible to people for free around the world, which that's pretty good. That's a good thing to do. I think that's it's a step in the right direction. I don't know what to tell you. I do not think that people think about the uncertainty of and like what those things mean. I really don't. I don't think people think about that because it's not really like built into the way that things are communicated. It's not exactly the point, right? And I will say that I do think that there's an attention problem. I think that people attribute it to people having less of an attention span, and I don't think that's actually true. I think that that's more of what it looks like rather than what it actually, like how it presents itself, but not what the actual cause, right? So people will be like, oh, well, kids these days or people these days don't have any attention span. Like they're just not paying attention to things for very long periods of time. And I'm like, yes, but I don't think it's because they're losing their ability to pay attention to things. I think it's because the market that we currently have is an attention-based market, and people don't have time. There's so much information being thrown at you 24/7 all the time, and you only have a window of opportunity. And so you're either trying to gather as much information as you can in the shortest amount of time possible, or you're trying to sift through all of this shit to find the thing that you're going to pay attention to, right? To be like, okay, this is the thing that I have time to invest in, right? So it's less about time management, and it's less about whether or not you're capable of paying attention to something, and it's more about trying to sift through large amounts of information to find the thing that you're willing to spend the time on in the first place. Does that make sense? Is what I'm saying, does that make sense? Did I explain that clearly? So people are either trying to cram in as much as fucking possible, or they're just trying to sift through what's worth cramming into as well. So you've got like this stacking problem. I really think it has very, very little to do with people's actual individual or even as a group's capability of paying attention to something, right? I mean, people still really very much care about the Epstein files, right? Like that's still an ongoing conversation. You'll notice that there are people who get into like drama and they will never let something go because they're just paying attention to it all the time. Right, so people do have an attention span. People will stick on things. It's just hard to predict what they're going to stick on, and hard to convince people, because that's what you're really doing, is you're trying to convince people to stay invested in something. And now, if you want to give Donald Trump fucking props for something, he makes people pay attention to him for long periods of time. So I guess he's got that going for him. Anyway, people are still being taught what to think instead of how to think. Yeah, that's the thing. That's a conversation for another day. I don't disagree with you. I think there's a little bit more to that, but yeah, maybe another time we can get into that a little bit more. I don't want to get too off topic here.
They don't get that uncertainty is a quantification of how certain you are.
They don't always get the downside. So my son was predicted to have short stature. And they gave me what the predicted height would be. And it sounded okay. I mean, we're a flexible society. Not everybody has to be tall. And then they gave me the 95% confidence intervals. And suddenly the bottom of the range was not so cool.
Right.
And so, we decided to take an intervention. So we took.
What? I'm sorry. Huh? You took intervention on your son because he wasn't gonna be tall enough? What does that mean? What? 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 I'm trying really hard not to be judgy right now, but I'm not succeeding. Like, that's why would you... I'm gonna give this guy the benefit of the doubt and say that this was for some kind of medical reason and medical purpose and not just, like, something ridiculous, which is what it makes it sound like. I'm gonna assume the best of this guy, all right? I don't know if I'm correct, so I'm withholding judgment, okay? I'm withholding judgment. That sounds really bad, dude. I don't... Why would you say this? Why? What the fuck? Okay. You know what? All right. Yeah, moving on. I'm not. No. Okay, keep going. What? Yeah, I'm assuming there must have been some kind of, like, medical thing. They put their son on the stretching rack. And, like, we're just getting all of the worst points of information about this scenario and no contextual information that would make it not problematic in like 700 different ways. Fuck me, dude. Don't worry, Cherish, there are treatments to help with your condition. For instance, carrying a little stool. I should get like a little backpack stool. That'd be great.
We tend to hear the part of the prediction that we like,
right,
and forget the other tail.
Right, and that's a sort of that leads into one of the questions I want to ask you, because one of the things that I think is so interesting about epidemiology is that climate change has a lot of a human element, but I don't think it has as much of a human element in terms of individual people's decisions really affecting health outcomes.
That depends on the person, I think. So, like, the decisions being made by the top 1% of people is very much definitive in its effect on climate change, right? So, like, people who own, like, fucking AI that's taking up a ton of energy and burning a lot of carbon footprint shit, blah, 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 blah. There's more to that. I'm not going to go into it, but, like, somebody like that, their individual decision definitively does matter, but I think she means, like, people's day-to-day life. Like, yours and mine, well, us normal, us plebeians out here, whether or not you recycle your paper isn't really gonna have the fucking effect that you think it's gonna have, right?
On a kind of shorter time scale than what you can see happening with climate change, right? I tell you, you go throw out your styrofoam cup, maybe that's somehow indirectly bad for the environment, but it's not bad tomorrow. You know, you drink cholera-infected water, you're dead tomorrow.
Well,
right?
Hopefully not.
No, okay, please don't
should
drink
be able
cholera-infected water. But anyway,
in the 19th century. But.
So to get back to how are we going to London, what are the other parts of this course? So right, the end goal of the course is modern simulation.
So generally, cholera is not going to kill you now because we know what it is, we know how to treat it, and we know how to make, like, we have hospitals that are survivable, but if you don't have access to those things, cholera can still very much kill you. So, with RFK Jr. at the helm, I'm sure things will be fine.
As the way that we predict our future now, okay? The origins of all that are, you know, people have wanted to predict their future forever. People are just curious about what's going to happen next. And the first records we have of official divination systems that we discuss in the course are Mesopotamians looking at the entrails of animals, particularly sheep, and trying to make predictions about the future and what they see.
See, I told you sheep herders were important.
As the abnormalities in, say, sheep livers. This is called haruspicy, if you don't know about this, but it turns out.
How'd that work for them?
There's a long story that we tell in the course, actually, about how they did this over thousands of years, and they honed the system, and they made records of how they did it on clay tablets, which have survived till now. And we actually have one of the world's experts on this system, who's Piotr Steinkeller in FAS, and he's part of the course, and so you should ask him.
It worked out for them in a way that they were basically doing autopsies and getting a lot of fucking information out of it. It wasn't necessarily predicting what they wanted it to predict, but it was definitely useful.
But interestingly, they did not do a lot of testing of their predictions. And so one of the things I've learned in developing the course is that that idea of testing a theory didn't come till somewhere, some people say somewhere in the Arab sort of scientific revolution, and other people say in the kind of European scientific revolution later, in what we would think of as the Renaissance. So anyway, so the first part of the course is all about these so-called ancient predictive systems. And then we sort of skip ahead to what are kind of the origins of what we think of as modern science, okay? And so a lot of people would start that, with, we do it through the story of the history of astronomy, which we don't do that because I'm an astronomer. We do that because that is kind of the most predictive science, in that people looked at the sky forever. There were observations, if you will, of the sky for a long time.
Everyone had the sky all the time. Everyone had the sky all the time, and the sky is predictable to some degree. Yes. Noted. Are we invading Canada, or is Canada invading us? Man, I feel like the trade war is already happening. And I don't think... Okay, call this predictive. Alright? We're gonna call this predictive. I don't think the United States, as it currently is, wants to, or is currently capable of invading Canada, like, on land. I don't think that they're going to, and I don't think they're capable of doing it right now. I think that you're gonna see things are gonna get things are already wacky. They're gonna get wackier. They're gonna get weird, wacky, inflatable tube dude for the next 4 to 5 years. So there's a really big question mark about what the United States and the people of the United States do in the next 2 to 3 years. And then at least 2 years after that. I think that Donald Trump and his lackeys are having trouble consolidating their power. So until that power is a little bit more consolidated, I don't think you're going to see an invasion take place. So I don't think that is going to be the case. But we can discuss more on another day.
Time, and that people made these kind of empirical theories about what was going to repeat, and could you make some mathematical system, even if you didn't have a theory, that was going to tell you, where particular bodies would be in the sky, and you could use that to tell time, and ultimately you could use that to navigate. And then, we tell the whole story. That's this dinner party that you heard about at my house, was the whole story of how you go from Ptolemy to Newton, and how you evolve to an actual predictive theory of gravity. So that's, from sort of the year 0 to the year 1700 or so, you have that evolution. And so we choose to cover that mostly with the story of how you get to a predictive theory of gravity through astronomy. But then in the 1800s, you have essentially the birth, as far as I understand it, and this is where you're far more expert than I, of what we could think of as epidemiology, or modern quantitative epidemiology. And so we use the John Snow story as a segue from this kind of, Newton discovers gravity period. Not discovers gravity, sorry. Newton understands and makes a theory of gravity.
That's the age-old debate of is math invented or is math discovered?
To, how do we get to this kind of data-driven approach to science that leads to, again, sort of you have to have evidence for your theory, and then predictive simulations where you actually input data, gather more data about how correct they were, and then go back and iterate. And actually, I wanted to show you this. So this is like a framework for the whole course, and you'll see that on the right hand, so on my right, your left hand side here, there's this set of ways that you can gather information. So some systems, like augury, which is where the Romans looked at the flight of birds to try to figure out what was.
I feel like I'm getting a flashback to our first course. Like we did this.
Whether they should go to war. Okay, that's observing what are apparently random phenomena and then trying to make something of whether that means something. Then there's randomizing, which is like throwing dice or pick up sticks, things like that. Then there's non-random, looking for non-random input, so from, for example, the Oracle of Delphi. And then there's deterministic processes that are not necessarily used in a deterministic way. So for example, the Mayans were really obsessed with how the lunar calendar and the motions of Venus and particular stars related to each other and particular alignments meant things that had nothing to do with time or seasons. Okay.
I'm just laughing because, as you probably know, we're launching another MOOC on improvement.
Right.
And what you have drawn here is exactly the central element of all scientific improvement, which is an observation, categorizing data, and then doing predictions and observations and testing and recalibrating your prediction based on what you find.
Yeah, and I don't know, did you know?
What is the scientific method for 500, Alex?
Well, I didn't know this, but I didn't appreciate until sometime this year in sort of preparing for this course. I sort of thought that people always did science that way and that they just didn't have as much information available. But it turns out,
this idea of prediction is at the very core of all quality improvement. And the way I teach quality improvement to scientists is to point out that you do the same thing if you're trying to develop a vaccine against cholera.
Right.
You have a theory, you make some predictions about what will happen if you administer the vaccine, and then you see whether or not it worked.
Exactly, and so that whole left-hand half, right, so obviously you observe using one of these systems, and then just like you said, you either invent some system or you try to improve your system using that data. You make a prediction, and that bottom half of the diagram where you actually go and check it and try to improve it, that's the part that's only existed recently.
Clay Christensen, who's over at the business school, has a.
As much as I'm sitting here being like, yes, I know, do I look bored to you? It's not because this interview is boring or like bad or anything. What they're saying is very interesting. It's just we already covered it, so go watch that.
Seldom quoted aspect of his work, which is all about observing data, classifying data, developing your theory, all of it iteratively predicting and confirming until you're ready to actually test it in real life. But even then, you're still making a prediction. And people, when they get to the stage of doing, let's say, a randomized controlled trial, forget there can still be what he calls anomalies that challenge your theory, and they try and adjust it all away with your fancy mathematical models instead of saying, well, why is there this anomaly, and what does that mean about my theory?
Yeah.
So it's like a little wobble in the orbit of Pluto. I mean, what does that do to my theory?
Exactly. No, I didn't know that about somebody. Make a note. We should go talk to Clay Christensen. I only know about his disruptive
well, nobody really knows this, but I always use his slide because it's all about explaining to people what improvement and knowledge really are. Epistemology, basically.
Excellent.
Oh God, it's gone to philosophy town. Hey, the intersection of how do we know about this and what do we think about this? What does this mean to the thing that we're thinking about? Epistemology. Ayo. Ayo. We need philosophy in school way earlier than we have it.
That's great. Well, we're all on the same wavelength here. We're all doing the same science.
So what we'll do is we're going to talk to a couple of people who focus on genomics in epidemiology today. And so that'll be after we do the Jon Snow story. We'll talk to them.
Genomics, like a gnome.
And kind of bridge to this. The current. So I wanted to ask you, so now you know sort of
I got it.
We'll get to Jon Snow in a second, but what I wanted to ask you is, you are a leader at this Institute for Healthcare Improvement, and so I know in the other course, I'm sure you explain deeply what that means, but can you explain for the purposes of this course what that institute does?
So the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, or IHI, was founded by Don Berwick, who you may remember ran for governor. He's kind of the guru of improvement. And our mission is to improve health and healthcare around the world, and to make care safer and better for patients and for just general people who happen to live in a community. And we do this with a bedrock of...
Sorry, you got me on just general people who live in a community. That's everybody. That's just everyone. Everyone is a general person who lives in a community. No. I like the way people speak sometimes. It's very funny to me. Sorry, that got me. I'm sorry. That one. Oh,
scientific quality improvement. And most people think quality improvement, you just go out and kind of do it. But as we've been discussing, it all involves scientific method.
Right.
You know, prediction, testing, confirming, adjusting, constantly running cycles to prove or disprove that your theory of causation, how you get from a change to a better outcome, is true or not. And we sometimes forget the or not and get very excited and jump up and down and all enthusiastic. But in the end, we have to come back to say, how good was our theory? Did it predict the way we hoped it would? So that's what we do. And we try and bring rigor to a
And how much of it, I mean, we'll get into the snow story in a minute, but you and I both know that
She keeps saying that, and we're nearly at 20 minutes.
John Snow had this sort of long quest where he was looking at the different...
Technically, scientific method doesn't aim to prove things, it tries to disprove things. Yes. Yeah. Basically, yes.
Water companies and trying to figure out in a kind of slow, methodical way by gathering data where he could, whether he could show that contaminated water was causing cholera. But then he had this very unfortunate event of this big cholera outbreak in 1854, where he had this, natural experiment I think he called it an experiment in Crucis, where you had whatever it was, 600 and something people die in the course of just more than a week. And that gave him this tremendous opportunity, if you will, to sort of test out his theories. And I'm just curious how much of what you guys do...
There is something special about being like, hey, a bunch of people died. What a great fucking opportunity for me. Like, that takes a mindset. You know what I mean? By the way, I am not dunking on that. That's like, that's probably a good thing, right? But I just wanted to point out, like, that's the, like, wow, this horrible thing happened. What a great opportunity.
Is opportunistic like that as opposed to planned long-term studies?
Yeah, I mean, this requires a lot of discipline. I always talk about foraging, harvesting, winnowing, and seeding. So we're always foraging for what look to be better ideas that lead to better outcomes. Some people call these positive deviants. People who've succeeded despite all the complexities of the U.S. healthcare system, for example. And we try and understand what are the properties of that success that we can study further under different contexts, different institutions, different communities, to see whether or not they still hold true. And in the end, to get the core attributes or specifications of that approach that can be spread more widely to have a good impact. So
I don't know if using the United States healthcare system is the best idea ever. Maybe, oh, I have an alarm. Maybe I'll be right back and I'm gonna go get some more tea. maybe that's what we do. I'll be back in a second. I'm back. What up? What did I miss? I got a cookie. Oh, you recognize the tune? The music was Patio Garden Flower Town, Glass Tappers, and the Swing Great Coffee Swing Good Coffee Great Coffee. That's what played while I was gone. Dunking the cookie. Our healthcare system doesn't do anything. Well, you know, it makes some people really rich. Part of it depends on the goal, right? So when you're talking about whether or not a process or a structure functions, you have to understand what the process or the structure is intended to do. So like just because it's doing something bad or doing something poorly doesn't mean that it's doing what it's intended to do poorly, right? So if the healthcare system is supposed to care about your health, then yeah, it's doing a bad job. But if it's there to make money, well, no, it does that. That's a thing that it does fairly consistently, so... But like, how do you delineate and how do you ensure that one thing that's intended to do something one way doesn't end up turning into something that is doing something a different way, right? Like, what are your stop gaps and stuff like that? And how do you avoid corruption and things? I'm eating this cookie.
We do a fair amount of that. It's easy not to do that well. When people get excited about their great innovative idea, you know, it tends to spread faster than it probably should. And some of these ideas are great, some of them aren't so great, and it's hard to get rid of them. Probably astrology would be one of these, although maybe you're an astrologer, so you should be careful.
I am not an astrologer.
But I think things can get embedded into our belief system and nobody wants to challenge them anymore.
Like miasma.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. So, all right, so the reason that we're going to London is because, in part, we're going to trace this whole story of how you get to Isaac Newton and also how the Longitude Prize happens in the Royal Greenwich Observatory. But in addition, while we're there, we're going to meet with Roz Stanwell Smith. I got it. Yes. Okay. Who is the head of the Jon Snow Society?
Oh, that's interesting.
That's the one we watched and we were like kind of sketched out by.
And she's going to tell us what the society's up to now. And their goals are to raise awareness of what Jon Snow did and the kinds of studies that he was interested in, and just kind of keep the story alive. And we'll be able to walk around Soho and we'll be able to see. Not much of Soho looks like it did in 1854.
No, it's really a little different.
Exactly.
Although there's some intersections, I think it's called the Five Dials or something. I mean, there are landmarks that I just was in London, so I was looking out for this stuff. It's not totally changed, but
right. You
it's
should
not
afterwards.
the same.
We should look at the map here, and we should compare it to. We have some modern maps of Soho, and Jared, our excellent editor, has been going through Google Street View and trying to reconstruct what we could possibly see and match it up to Jon Snow's map here. But so maybe just for the benefit of people who aren't total experts on the Jon Snow story, we should kind of go through what the public perception for people who know just a little bit about the story is, and then what the slight deviations from that story that are really important are. And so
you guys are reminding me in chat of, you're making me think of something. I'm going to pull this up. It's a clip from, it's an old show, I guess now, but Penn and Teller's Bullshit. They did one on the Vatican, they did the Three Stooges, they did vaccinations. But this is the one you guys are making me think of.
No, Teller, I'm not.
This is Penn and Teller Bullshit explains wealth redistribution. Sorry, you guys can't see that very well. Let me adjust this. There you go. But now, where does Bill Gates live? So good. It's such a good bit, man. Anyway, moving on.
You want to start?
Well, first, I think it's only fair to say there's no William Farr Society. And you may wonder why I would...
Hey, that's the thing we talked about last time. There's no William Farr Society. Like, why are we so obsessed with Jon Snow in particular? What the fuck?
Bring that up. William Farr was wrong. Right. But he did use statistics, and one might say epidemiology, to come to the wrong conclusion. What he did, as you may know, is to calculate the occurrence of cholera around London, and especially around the Thames, by the elevation of the land above the Thames.
That's right.
And he showed a really strong correlation between elevation and lower risk of getting cholera, because he believed that miasmas, these noxious gases come from human feces and animal waste and all that.
I mean, shit does roll downhill.
Kind of stuff. All these bad gases were causing cholera. And unfortunately, his analysis didn't account for all the other factors that might have been important. Income level, what kind of house you lived in, what kind of water you got. All he did was have this theory about miasmas from the Thames, and it looks really good. If you look at that graph and his data, it's pretty compelling, but it's wrong.
That's right.
So there's no William Farr Society.
Even though William Farr was also one of the guys that fucking debunked the miasma theory later in his life. But fuck him, I guess. Fuck him for having good data and misinterpreting it when he was doing his best. God, this is why society fucking sucks.
Of some interest, he also was a buddy of Florence Nightingale. We know how famous she was. And Florence Nightingale wanted to demonstrate that the conditions in hospitals in England were abhorrent. And she compared mortality rates and what she thought were well aerated.
That lady was kind of like me, who was like, wash your damn fucking hands, you damn dirty ape.
Well-tended hospitals off in the countryside or by the sea against the mortality rate in hospitals in London that she was especially appalled by.
Right.
And unfortunately, when she teamed up with William Farr, they used an incorrect denominator, and so some hospitals had a mortality rate of greater than 100%. So, he's a pretty well-known statistician, but we can easily, because we're so rapt attention on our theory, distort what we see and not account for all the other factors that could be in play. So that's just some background. So Snow, had a different approach. He had this theory that water, contaminated water, was responsible for cholera, and that it was spread by drinking water that had the cholera organism in it. It's important to realize that cholera generally doesn't...
Except he had no idea that cholera was an organism in any way, shape, or form. He had no idea about that at all.
Doesn't survive a very long time in water. It can, if it finds the right host, as in the Gulf of Mexico. It attaches, I think it's to chitin of certain little things, that snails and whatever in the water. But in general, it doesn't survive in the water. So just maybe keep that in mind.
Right.
So here's this outbreak, and as you said, the idea was that maybe the water supplier was going to be the cause. And some water was more drinkable than other water, depending on where you got it.
God, you get one thing wrong and you're doomed to be fucking shit on in history forever because you got a denominator incorrect. Fuck, man. I don't want to be a scientist.
Right.
And this one water supply that came to the Broad Street pump was known for its special purity. People would ship it a distance to have that water because it tasted better, it looked better, and so. But that was what his thinking was at the time.
While I take a
Yeah,
drink.
go. It's good water. There's nothing wrong with that water, I promise you.
Yeah.
So when this vast outbreak of hundreds of cases you said occurred, he used basic epidemiology, and we use the term shoe leather epidemiology to describe what he did. He got on his feet and walked around and started asking where are these illnesses occurring, and he began to plot them out on a map, which is sometimes called the ghost map or John Snow's map. So he could see patterns. Epidemiologists essentially look for patterns of disease and then make a prediction or find an association between hypothetical causes or origins of the outbreak. And I'm not going to go into all the details of his map there. Some of them are actually quite interesting. But basically, it looked as though these cases were clustered around the Broad Street water pump. And as he began to ask people, well, where'd you get your water? It turned out that somebody who got sick with cholera who wasn't near.
We're getting the same story for like the 5th time at this point in this series.
The Broad Street pump was quite a ways away, had that water shipped to them.
That's right.
And there are other...
By her children. I think.
Oh, is that right?
Terrible
Oh,
story.
well, even
Yes.
better.
Yeah.
Nothing.
I wonder how short I could make a video about this if I took out everything that they repeated. Now, part of education is repetition. So that's one of the reasons why I'm not like harping on it and saying it's bad. Like, it's not a bad thing to do. It's just like, get on with it.
Nothing like implicating the kids.
Yeah.
So he had a pretty strong suspicion, and it was so strong that he persuaded people to the health authorities to remove the handle from the Broad Street pump to end the scourge.
Right.
And that's the famous story that gets told. That's why the pump is there, although the site has been moved, as I understand it, and that's why there's a pub there so people can drink. It was often thought that if you drank alcoholic beverages, that would somehow kill the organism. So, better than drinking foul water. Actually, there was an interesting thing in his studies that this one brewery where people didn't drink the Broad Street water pump, they drank beer all day. There was no disease whatsoever, or very few cases.
And the other one was the workhouse, the prison, where they had their own well, and those people didn't get sick either.
So he's doing what I said earlier.
Smitty, you can't just fucking call me out like that. I'm doodling on my binder waiting for class to end. No, you can't just say that. You can't just bully me like this.
About Clay Christensen, the guy at the Harvard Business School who talks about how you learn, how you develop your theory, how you prove your prediction. Basically, he was looking for anomalies, things that looked anomalous, but if you looked at them carefully, they're the exception that proves the rule. Right. So pretty simple epidemiology. Now, when I talk to my students about this, and as you know, I teach a SLS 26 general education course that includes cholera and John Snow, I always ask them, so did John Snow perform a case control study, which is fundamental in epidemiology. It's the greatest tool for working up outbreaks that we have. In a case control study, you study the exposure of the cases, in this case to water pumps, and the exposure of the controls to people who were not cases, who were not sick, and their exposure to water pumps, and there should be a difference. John Snow did not look at controls. He only looked at...
I don't think that's true. I think he's incorrect about this. I know he's the professional. I know he's the professor. I know I'm just some schlub goblin on the internet that doesn't know shit. But this guy literally was going around and looking at the people who died and noted that people in the brewery didn't die and people in the workhouse didn't die. And they found out that they figured out what the reasoning was, is because the people working in the brewery were drinking beer and weren't being exposed to the fucking contaminated water pump, and the people at the warehouse were all drinking from their own well, so they were not exposed. So what do you mean he didn't cover control groups? He also covered the lady who got it out in buttfuck nowhere. That's part of the control group, because she got it out of buttfuck nowhere because some people shipped it to her, but no other people got sick. That's the control group. How did he not have control group? He might not have written it down as much, he might not have noted it as much, but it was clearly part of the study. Like, it might not have been intentional in the way that you want it to be, to match your standard, but that doesn't mean he didn't do it at all. Like, what do you mean? This is why I'm not good. For anybody who's been following this series, this is why I'm not good at school. I think the teacher is incorrect. So if the teacher asks me a question, did he do this? And I say, yes, he did. Here's why I think he did that. And the teacher says, he didn't. You're wrong. And I fail the class. This is like my interpretation of the information he's giving me. He's telling me these people did, like, this guy did this thing, and then he's turning around and telling me, but that doesn't count. And I'm like, but why doesn't it count? What do you mean? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Like, I don't understand. How did he not study the control group? Or did he just not study it in the way that would satisfy current standards of study or current standard of, like, a modeling system? Because just because he, like, we're talking about fucking, what year are we talking about? 1854? 1843? Like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Well, of course he's not using your standard of methodology. He didn't even have germ theory to work on at the time. So, what What do you mean? This is why I can't. Am I stupid? Like, am I dumb? Does what I'm saying doesn't make any fucking sense? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy.
At cases, people were sick, and arrayed them on a map and said, these are closer to the Broad Street water pump, and here's some exceptions to prove the rule. So, as the father of epidemiology, the fundamental
Here's some exceptions that prove the rule.
tool for working up outbreaks was not what he actually utilized.
And the rest of London not getting sick is not considered a control?
Well, he didn't really talk about it that way.
Right.
And if you read his stuff, it wasn't, he wasn't looking.
He didn't talk about it that way, therefore it doesn't count. Because I can read his mind from the future.
He had a vague idea that there were these people who weren't sick, but it wasn't a disciplined way.
Got it.
Reverend Whitehead was, who's not known as the father of epidemiology, he was a local guy and he knew everybody, and so he was able to go around and ask questions. First, he found more cases, as we'll get to in a minute, but he also interviewed.
You mean the guy that was working with Jon Snow? So Jon Snow did take it into consideration. Because this other guy... In this essay, I will.
Viewed non-cases, and that was more like a case control study. So maybe Reverend Whitehead ought to be the father of epidemiology. I mean, but Jon Snow, what he did was really quite remarkable.
The way I understand it was a partnership between the two of them, and Whitehead didn't really believe the waterborne theory, but he was kind of helping because these were his parishioners, and he was trying to just help and try to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, just a layman epidemiology.
Right.
As some of us say, I'm just an old country epidemiologist, but he did pretty good epidemiology for a country reverend.
Right.
So you're right, though. He started with without really buying the theory that Jon Snow had, which is all the better. Yeah. Somebody who isn't totally heart and soul wedded to their theory is probably a better observer. So
you mean that science is out there to disprove things? The methodology is about disproving things, not proving and getting married to your fucking idea so much so that you fucking blow your own brains out over it and just shove everything you know and your knowledge up your own ass? Why am I angry? Why am I mad about this? I don't need to be mad about this. This is dumb. All right, I'm not mad anymore. I'm over it.
remove the handle of the Broad Street pump, and the outbreak ceased. So, unfortunately, Jon Snow had missed a case. This baby Lewis, who lived at 40 Broad Street, a 5-month-old child who had had cholera. And people noted at the time that there were a few days where the water from the Broad Street pump was not its usual pristine, clear, nice-smelling stuff, but it was a little bit fetid. And it turned out that that coincided with when this baby was sick, and eventually it was shown that there was a connection between where that baby's waste were being disposed of and the water that went to the Broad Street pump.
Right.
So in fact, that was the cause of the immediate cause of the outbreak and the source at the Broad Street pump. But by the time
Dude, this whole thing it just really, really seems like the importance tied to this guy is like a toxic fan base. like, oh my god, it clearly wasn't one guy. Why do we have to designate one person? Like, clearly it wasn't. Like, what are we talking about? I don't understand.
he took the handle, the baby was dead.
Right.
And the organism doesn't continue to survive, and the water looked pure. And so probably taking the handle off was true, but not.
So there's two parts of that story that from reading Stephen Johnson's work and some other people's work sound like they're fictionalized a little bit to make a better story. And the two parts that I also originally thought were true, but maybe not true. One is that he made this famous map kind of as he was going along, or at least some draft of this famous map. And the way Stephen Johnson tells the story, he made the map after. And it's not clear whether he was actually making a spatial map as he was going along, or if
He could have just had a city map and like noted some things and then corroborated his tables and his data and put it together. Why are we obsessed about this very particular map? I don't like. It's a cool map. It's fucking useful. It did a good job in demonstrating like the point and then spreading out. Like it's visually appealing.
He and Whitehead knew the neighborhood so well that he was essentially making this
Well, he had a
map
visual
instead.
map, but he knew about maps. I mean, maps of this, like
kind of-
this,
But he knew about maps, guy. Like, what are we talking about?
had been used in Exeter, as I remember. So I believe he was aware that this is a new way to display patterns of disease using a map. So, but that was not the first thing he talked about. He had a visual, mental picture of what was going on, as we all do, and we probably shouldn't start mapping things out, but we should collect
The other
our
thing I
data.
love about this map is that this version of it doesn't have this line that he drew on it, and
The Bernoulli.
the
Sorry.
Voronoi boundary.
I always
And
pronounce it
so actually, when we
incorrectly.
get to astrophysical simulations in this course, which we'll talk about, it turns out that the best astrophysical simulations now actually also use what's called Voronoi tessellation, which is to divide things into the most efficient cells. Okay?
So can I confess, I mean,
Sure.
this is for your students who may
Sure.
want to know that I can sit here and pontificate about this.
Yeah.
I read for 3 hours.
Bro, we noticed. Bro, sorry, the echo is coming from my mic. That I pressed the wrong button. We noticed that you can pontificate about this. I think we picked up on that.
About those maps.
Yeah.
And I still can't explain them correctly to people without kind of getting all confused.
Right.
But I guess the basic principle is it's not drawing a circle around a pump
Right.
and assuming that that's the right map.
Right.
The basic idea is, well, how far a walk is
Exactly.
it?
Exactly.
And that was a far more useful map.
But that is still taking a thing and drawing a circle around it, because the radius, like the fucking line between where you are and how far out the next line of the circle is the distance that you're traveling and how long it would take you to walk there. What do you mean? What are we talking about? I don't understand.
Map in a way and really kind of nailed the
My personal
story.
favorite, though, is in terms of the exceptions of the people who didn't get sick is, so you should know that I teach courses about data visualization. And so the way that I came to know about this story was through the fame in the data visualization world of this map. And my friend and colleague, Edward Tufte, is one of the people who took the boundary
You know
off.
Edward Tufte?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, and so...
I'm so blown away. Now I'm in awe.
Okay, I gave a talk with Edward Tufte earlier this year, so here we could just. But anyway, so there's a version of this map.
There's something amusing to me when somebody's impressed that you know somebody. It's like, I didn't do anything, I just know the person.
That does have this boundary that shows, and we should go walk around Soho, and we should show how long it takes to
Well,
walk
they
to
may
the
have changed
location
the
of the.
routes, though.
The
They're not
streets are
much.
remarkably the same.
Yeah, they're still all crooked.
And so we can walk around a little iPhone timer and say how long.
Well,
does
no,
it
you want
take?
to do something fun. Put on your Google Maps and try and follow it around Soho.
Yeah.
And I swear they don't really get it.
Really?
No,
Okay.
I mean, I made wrong turns. I was trying to find a sushi place. And an
Yo
hour.
Sushi, that one with the conveyor belt. I've been to that.
No,
one.
I don't like those. The food sits there too long.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, the
go
epidemiologist
to
just
that
told me
one.
not to eat at Yo Sushi. Mark that for the record.
don't.
Okay. So anyway, what I was going to say is the kind of.
All right, the epidemiologist, the guy studying health stuff, was like, yo, bro, don't eat sushi on a conveyor belt because it sits there for too long, I guess. I don't know. Have it on good authority.
Data visualization that I do is not only two-dimensional, but actually three-dimensional. And what was fascinating to me in rereading Stephen Johnson's book is he talks about the widows and the elderly people who lived on some of the high floors of the buildings, and they systematically got less sick than other people. And the reason was because in a three-dimensional world, their walk to the pump was not only longer, but because they walk slowly or infirmed. If you measure this in time and effort, it was too much effort
You mean that thing about elevation was correct, just not for the right reason?
To go get water from
Well,
the
what
pump.
about their neighbors who are supposed to be socially conscious
Yeah,
and
they were
watching
helping.
out for them?
Yeah,
and
they were
bringing
helping,
them?
but a lot of them were dying.
Yeah.
And so what I really want, and I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to ask Roz when we get to London, is I've tried, I have a data visualization that I can show you that actually is an interactive visualization of this map, and so we can filter by how far you are from the pump, but actually only in radial distance, not in walking distance. But what I don't have and what I can't get from the records is the time sequence of the deaths.
I don't have that.
Right, but if
frankly,
you
so-
read Tufte's account or if you read Stephen Johnson's account, you get this temporal story about, well, first baby Louis got sick and, her father and then the people next door and it was their house that contaminated the well.
That's really
There's this
important.
kind of evolution that you can't see.
Yeah,
in the
so,
map.
so we talked about case control studies being fundamental to epidemiology. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's okay.
But we talked about case control being elemental.
Right.
So is an epidemic curve. And so the time of cases is
Exactly.
always the first thing you do.
Right.
I mean, you always show the epidemic curve. And in this case, it would show very clearly a common source outbreak, which means it came from one place.
Right.
It's so sudden, and unless somebody dropped aerosols of cholera on the entire
Which
populace.
is the miasma theory.
Well, but this is germ warfare theory.
Right.
It wouldn't work because you don't inhale cholera, right?
Yeah,
You
right.
eat it.
So let me ask you something. So I know only a little bit about epidemiology, but I know that there are these statistical models that are that don't take spatial variables into account. So this SIR model and the SEIR model, and we'll show little
You're
simulations.
going to ask
of
me
them.
about this? Me
No,
who
no.
barely passed
No,
math in high school.
no, I'm not going to ask you. But I'm going to say that then, as far as I understand it, the slightly more sophisticated models start including spatial information, and then the models that people run now, the kind of simulations that people do now, are often these ones that are focused on what's going to happen to an individual person and sort of modeling the life of that person. I'm trying to remember what they're called, agent-based models.
Yes, they
right?
are agent-based models. Yeah, they're used a lot in community health work.
Yeah, and so in other words, clearly Snow and Whitehead were thinking in the spatial way, okay? They weren't thinking so much in the statistical way because that almost, it doesn't require that you have a germ theory of disease, but it requires that you have some kind of theory of infection, right? And of...
Wait, didn't a lot of John Stow's notes contain charts and statistics? Were they not praising him at the beginning of this for utilizing statistics? Now they're saying he didn't think about this in the way of statistics? I'm a little bit confused. What? Am I misremembering?
Incubation times and things like that. But what about this agent-based modeling? And can you tell us more about what that is?
I don't think I can.
You can't? Okay.
No, because I don't do it.
Okay.
And I can barely explain it to people, so I'm not
Okay,
going
good. We'll get
to
some
try and do
other-
it here. But I will say that the idea of time and space is increasingly incorporated in other predictive models, especially around influenza.
Okay.
So if you contact my friend John Brownstein
Okay.
over at Boston Children's and Harvard, he does this for predicting when flu is going to start. He did a really wonderful study published in the New England Journal showing the frequency and patterns of air traffic and the number of people who were flying predicts when the influenza outbreak in the U.S. will begin.
Great.
He
I'll
did a
wash my hands
similar
even better.
analysis for this virus called MERS that comes out of the Middle East.
Yep.
I guess a lot of this is relevant to COFAFE, and like the prediction modeling, the how to respond to it, yada yada yada.
Looking at where people would go when they were sick by air and other means, and it represents the magnitude of the travel by the size of the circles and the thickness of the lines, and same thing for Ebola. So he does that routinely, and he does it from multiple data sources. So he uses truly big data,
Right.
Press reports, tweets, and all that kind
And
of
the
stuff.
data sources, importantly, to get back to what we were saying at the beginning about how it's really, epidemiology has to take into account what's going on in the environment that isn't caused by humans, so things like the weather, and also economically, so things like how much do plane tickets cost. And so in those kind of big models of a spread of an epidemic now, of course, we have some sort of theory on a microbial level of how this disease works, but it seems like it's also equally important to know how people behave and how systems behave.
Yeah, but you know, you can take this all to the point where you forget common sense. So in the MERS-CoV, that viral epidemic I was just telling you about, we didn't need really sophisticated models to figure out that maybe it's bad to be near a camel.
Okay.
So when epidemiologists go out to ask about an epidemic, there's a whole series of questions they ask about exposures and habits that are routine and really don't need a sophisticated model. If you do simple 2x2 tables, or I always call it table 1 in your paper, where you just compare cases and non-cases, this stuff falls out pretty rapidly. And in my experience, it's pretty unusual for a regular epidemic to have to go to that level. I think if you're trying to predict in the future what's going to happen if all the camels go wild in the Middle East and it's during the Hajj, then you probably need a sophisticated model. But for determining associations of causality, I'm impressed that less is more.
Okay, that's great, because now you bring me back to my second question about things that you hear about this Jon Snow story that make a great story but aren't necessarily true. And so the second one has to do with time and common sense. And so it seems like if you say the water is poison and the water is not poison but infected and the water is coming from this source and we can take off the handle on the pump and now people can't get the water, that you're going to end the epidemic. But I think the issue is that some people have looked at this and said that the epidemic had essentially burnt itself out and run out.
Timing of increases, especially for covfefe, is also easy. When kids go back to school, sitting in closed classrooms, breathing each other's air, huge viral loads being brought home. Yeah, kids in school are notorious for carrying all the germs forever because they all touch each other and they don't wash their hands and they're fucking gross. This is why I say children are just a bad idea and should probably be discontinued. Yeah, you know, all right, fair enough. Are you advocating for the murder of 3-year-olds, Titan? How dare you?
Out of people to kill because the people who were there had sensibly left the area saying something is wrong, you know, if you're still alive, and they went out to the hinterlands. And so there are some people who say that actually removing the pump handle didn't really necessarily have an effect.
Well, it didn't, because the propositus, the index case was dead. The water was now pure. I know that people say you can use up your susceptible population. You know, using up your susceptible population is important, and epidemics do die out that way. Some people argue that the plague, for example, that the mortality was incredibly high. Maybe the people didn't die, either fled, and some of them did, or they have genetic immune determinants that somehow protect them more than it protects other people, or they're just lucky.
Now, about this index case being dead.
And sometimes it's all of the above. There are a lot of factors. Go figure.
Poor baby Lewis here. Well, the way I understand it, there was some horrible cesspool in the building where she lived that other people would have gotten sick and contributed to also. So wouldn't it have lasted a little bit longer than?
I don't know. I mean, the water was said to have cleared. So I don't know.
Can you actually see?
Well, you can see, you don't see the bacteria.
Right.
But if there's really a connection between a source where there's, well, that's a good point, though, you're making. So why wouldn't it have continued to look dirty just from the feculent water? I don't know the story about other people using it. I thought it was a backyard thing that the family
it was
used.
in the basement of the building where they lived.
Okay, so other
was a
people
cesspool
could
right next to the actual well.
Well, maybe
so
those sick people had
seepage.
already, I mean, they'd been used up, as it were. They were already sick or not sick.
I don't know, but yeah, I don't know enough about water and contamination and how this rice water that's produced by the sick people.
Well, that rice water is just the way the stool looks.
Right, but I'm just wondering whether that could get into the water supply and make it look cloudy, and whether it's that or something else that would make it.
I don't know the extent of the connection between the cesspool and
I don't know.
you know how much was flowing in. We're getting beyond, I think,
Right,
what the
but
historical
importantly,
record
what we're
has.
going to do now is just for fun. We're going to go to London. We're going to go to Soho. We're going to pour some colored something in one of the toilets. We're going to flush it, and we're going to film it, and then we're going to make an animation of how the sanitation system works in London.
Well, that's what's pretty much done now,
Yeah.
right? I mean, One of the outbreaks that I worked up at Boston Children's Hospital was actually the first time a true airborne chicken pox outbreak had been recorded in healthcare. And what we did, a girl came in with what's called transverse myelitis, but basically a virus.
All right, myth here, if anybody knows the answer. When I was growing up, when one kid got the chicken pox, all the parents were like, quick, give my kid chicken pox. Because having chicken pox makes you immune to chicken pox later in life, or makes you less susceptible to chicken pox in the future. Is this true? This was just something that adults said when I was when I was younger. Is that a real thing, or is that like one of those, like, I guess it's not homeopathic. Maybe it is homeopathic. Is that like you know, legit true, or is that pretend true? Want to see something absolutely stupid? Yeah, all right, hit me. What do you got? Yeah, what do you got? What the fuck? What is happening? Is this on We Want Plates? What? What am I looking at? What is this? What is that paper that they're lighting on fire? Is that cheese? I'm so confused. Like, is it just flash paper? Is it just flash paper and they're like, oh, my burger bun jumped through the hoop. Good fucking God. What are we doing? What are we doing? Like the, okay, sir, this will cost you $1,500. All right.
It cut her spinal cord through the inflammation. And so she was admitted for treatment, and she was put on very high doses of what we call steroids, which you're probably familiar with. And she happened to have chicken pox at that time, and as a result developed pneumonia with the chicken pox, which is not that common. So she was aerosolizing or coughing up clouds of basically chicken pox virus. It turned out that the ventilation system that exhausts air from her isolation room was blocked. So the air went under the door and down the hall, and even went outside the building, along the edge of the building, was sucked in air conditioning units down the hallway. So 2 ways the air could go. And we just took oil of wintergreen and liberated it in her room and immediately smelled it all over the ward, which you'd never have if there was good exhaust.
Physics, we call
and then
this
somebody
test
came in
particles.
from the school public health, because we had, if you're going to publish this in the New England Journal, you can't say we used oil of wintergreen. That would never fly. So we got, I think it was because it's so folksy. I mean, you know, come on, this is, like you said, where's your agent-based model? So we got a guy came in with, I think it was sulfur hexafluoride, a benign gas, and he could measure it with great finesse all over the word. And we showed the same thing. So this idea of tracing things that way, we use that in kids. If we want to show that there's a connection.
Didn't NASA have a highly effective, highly technical tool to find out if a specific invisible gas was around, and it was brooms? like straw brooms, and they'd be like, oh, is there a leak? They'd have to check to see if it would burn. It would start burning away the brooms.
From, let's say, trauma between the brain, the cerebrospinal fluid, and the nose or the pharynx, we use a little dye. And in this case, it's a tracer dye, radioactive isotope.
So I'm trying to think if Jon Snow did anything like that.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. And also,
I don't know how they discovered the connection. I know they discovered it.
I think that was later. I think they actually dug it up. That was later. But what was I going to say? So, yeah, I was also, the first time I read the Jon Snow theory, a lot of times the problem is that people who live in the modern world and who consider themselves somewhat educated don't think enough about the history of science, and they don't think about what it was like before we knew something. And
I think that's a fair assessment. I don't think that's something that gets brought up very much in your day-to-day life.
So everybody knows that germs cause disease, right? But like the idea that people didn't appreciate that?
Does everybody know that? I don't know, but okay.
Until sometime in the late 1800s, it's just mind-blowing to sort
But you know, this is really interesting because if you go back to the plague, which I teach in my SLS course, it's quite remarkable how almost every measure that let's say, Venice took around the plague, all their public health measures are based essentially on the belief that this was a contagious disease, that it was not spread by miasmas.
So they knew about some kind of
contagion. They knew that something was going on, and it wasn't just some people, built walls of fire or they fled to the mountains because they didn't want to breathe the air. But a lot of these things about how you dispose of bodies, quarantine. What's quarantine have to do with miasmas, right? And they very strict quarantine laws. They were replicated in England when the plague struck there in later years. So
I'm back to, wasn't Rome doing this before the cholera outbreak and before this the father of epidemiology was a thing?
The actions of the people actually implied that they sensed it was something else. And
okay, they sensed it. This is a thing. This is a thing that irritates me, and it's like it irritates me probably more than it should. It doesn't always bother me, but it bothers me more often than not. When you're talking about people who did things in the past and didn't have access to knowledge, talking about it like, oh, they just sensed something, like they didn't know or they didn't think things through. Like they might not have known what the cause was, but they knew something was going on. It wasn't just total intuition based off of luck. It was, hey, there's a problem, people are dying, we don't know what's causing it, we're going to start trying to do different things to prevent it, and we're going to stick with the thing that seems to work regardless of whatever is actually causing the problem. We do that now. We don't know everything. There are things we don't know about and haven't figured out yet, so we just try different. We throw human suffering at it, and we trial and error. We just brute force shit until it fucking works, or until it works well enough that it's not worth finding a new way to do it. So, to talk about people who were doing this in the past with less knowledge than we currently have, with knowledge that we only have now because they did it in the past, as it's just, oh, they just sensed something was wrong, it's shitty. It's just a shitty thing that it's so condescending. It's so fucking we're better than they are, and we're not. We're the same. We're the same fucking assholes. We're making the same fucking mistakes. We're making the same, we're doing the exact same thing. Everything is just brute force trial. All of science is just a brute force trial and error and throwing human suffering at it until we solve the problem. That's it. That's all it is. And to pretend that we're doing anything new or different, as if people in the past didn't do the exact same fucking thing. Admittedly, the advent of the scientific method has made it more consistent and has given us tools at a faster rate to work on specific things, but it's still just trial and error. I try a thing, did it work? Yes, no. I try a thing, did it work? Yes, no. I try a thing, did it work? Yes, no. Here's all the data of trying the thing and whether or not the thing fucking worked or didn't. And we just throw human suffering at it until it stops. The end. That's how we do everything.
It was contagious and that there was something transmitting it. If you look at the history of syphilis, which, as you know, some people think arrived in Naples on Christopher Columbus's ships and caused an outbreak among the French who were besieging the city. There was the guy who named syphilis, I'm going to get his name wrong, Frascatore, I think it was. He imagined that there were little particle essentially means fomites that were responsible for transmitting syphilis. So people have always, I think, imagined that there's
Fomites.
something wrong with this. It's all about the air theory.
So, but I think that the idea of germs multiplying and of diseases getting worse.
No, that was not
later.
imagined.
Right, that was later.
Not imagined.
So the way I understand it, there was this dilution theory that there was some contagion essentially, and that the more people got sick, the more dilute this sort of poison got.
Yeah.
Is that not true?
Don't know.
I read that somewhere. I'll have to look it up.
I don't know. All I know is that people do things that strike me as odd if you think it's miasma. So during the plague, as you may know, Jews were blamed. And they were blamed because they poisoned the wells with plague. So what does that have to do with...
Oh, blaming the Jews. How unique. Why is that? Why is that like such a common thing? What happened? There's got to be something. Like what happened that made it so that everybody wants to blame the Jews for everything all of the time? Like, what? Why is it always the Jews?
With miasmas, right? And it was Pope Clement, I believe, who pointed out, how can that be if the Jews themselves fall sick?
Yeah.
And so he basically was doing a bit of a case control study, right? Well, the Jews are cases, but they're also...
Oh, well, that counts as a case control study, but what Jon Snow did doesn't count.
Being blamed. And it's all very interesting to me. It belies the naivete of the people at the time. There was recently a paper that one of my students pointed out, going back 1,000 years to Anglo-Saxon England, where they discovered a fragment of a manuscript about a potion that was put together by women, I think they were nuns actually, to treat staphylococcal boils. And now they've recreated that recipe from the fragment, and it's marvelously effective. So people were smarter than we think they were way back then.
Well, it's interesting.
Then stop saying that they just had a sense that something was happening.
Because one of the threads in the course is this evolution from what we call data to theory. And before you get to a predictive theory that has a kind of rationale under it, so say in this case the germ theory of disease, you have these kind of empirical regularities that people see. And it's like, well, if I make this potion...
Comets.
Sorry?
Comets.
Comets are an example that we talk about in the course, exactly. And we talk about them as harbingers of doom, and that kind of prediction. And it's not until later where people understand gravity and that these things are just repeating phenomenon that they go, oh, okay, maybe they're not harbingers of doom. But in terms of the, potions and traditional medicines that work, you're right, you can kind of empirically invent things. Kepler did this. Kepler didn't know about gravity. Right, but he said, if I make the orbits ellipses, this works much better than if they're circles.
I remember that vaguely.
Right, well, right, but I mean, it's like just like, ooh, let's play with math and get a better answer. And so it's like,
let's just keep trying different things and see which one is the most correct. Oh wow, go figure.
Change his potion.
But isn't it interesting that you're talking about how theories, some based on empiric observation, some of them remarkably astute, coexisted side by side with nonsense.
Yes.
And it's no different.
It's still true.
Today,
yes.
Right? I mean, theories, and I'm not going to take sides, but creationism, homeopathic remedies, I mean, these are wild theories that exist right alongside of modern medicine with synthetic drugs that are targeted to conformations of proteins and all this data we have about evolution and climate change and so forth. So I think it's a natural, we hold on to the kind of mysterious, the not easily explained phenomenon and theories, and at the same time people will say, well, there's this thing called science and we can actually use it to predict.
Yeah, and so the other thing that I found really interesting in sort of studying up on all these subjects for this course is the whole idea that philosophy and religion and science were essentially all one thing.
All one thing.
Until relatively recently.
Right.
And this kind of...
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say they still are one thing. We arbitrarily draw lines and boxes around things to make it easier for us to compartmentalize them for our own understanding, for pattern recognition, and for education. The actual differences between these things is very, very almost like it's semantics.
kind of cold-hearted version of science is really relatively recent.
Yeah, I have a teaching fellow whose background is Persian, and here we are teaching infectious disease and all this kind of stuff, and he's constantly talking about philosophy. And he's right, because until recently this was philosophical science, and a lot, in fact, quality improvement science.
It's the same kind of difference between hard science and soft science, right? Like the lines that we draw are ultimately arbitrary. They're just ones that we've decided to stick between topics, right? Religion, philosophy, and science are all studying a lot of the same fucking thing. It's just sometimes they use different ways and sometimes they don't. And sometimes they cover similar topics and sometimes they branch out a little bit. Philosophy and science in particular should be married a lot closer together than they actually currently are. But that's people doing that, not the topics doing that, not the science isn't doing that. The people doing the thing are the thing doing that. The thing that makes the difference between religion, science, and philosophy has more to do with the way the people behave rather than the actual topics themselves.
Science that we talked about earlier actually derives from philosophical thinking. It's very clear pedigree.
Okay,
you can trace it back.
Sure.
Not me. I don't know anything about philosophy, but my betters demonstrate this all the time.
Excellent. So yes, and what I was going to say is the idea that things happen for a reason, or that phenomena exist for a reason, which I think the ancient Greeks called teleology. But that is what's missing from science today, and most people consider that a good thing. But some people don't. And so some of this so-called quackery is people who don't. And it's always interesting to me to think about what people 200 years, 1,000 years, hopefully they're still here, from now, think about us. We're the same as the people, 1,000 years ago who we're looking at, then.
Well, I'm very tolerant, so, I don't like to use terms like quackery. So my brother-in-law believes in this homeopathic stuff where he's taking things where maybe there's a molecule, if any, by chance.
So you think it, you just don't say it. Oh, okay. That's definitely better, I guess. All right.
In what he's taking, and he firmly believes that it makes his arm stronger in real time, that it fights infection. But and I'll sit there and humor him about that, whatever, But when he got...
So you're a condescending prick. Okay. Oh, man. You're just a condescending dick pretending you're not. Yeah, all right, LARP.
Sepsis last week. I told him, go to the hospital, get antibiotics, take your homeopathic stuff, do whatever you want, but do this other thing, which we know is scientifically correct.
I hope it worked. I hope it worked.
Something worked. He's better.
Okay.
Maybe the homeopathic remedy.
I'll actually tell you that you should take a look at this video, if no one has sent it to you, that we made of James Leonard, who's a performance artist who's created what he calls a divination tent. And we set it up on the roof of the observatory. And his goal is actually to get people to think about climate change. And he does tarot card readings in this tent.
Oh, yeah, that. I forgot about that.
And he goes around as a performance art piece and installs this thing in. And I tried to ask him, sort of, what's the connection here? He tells a whole backstory, which you can go watch on the video, and the people in the course will have seen this video, of how he came to want to do this because somebody accused climate change forecasters as being like fortune tellers. And he's like, well, no, they're not. And so he made this sort of almost fortune-telling themed tent to get people to think about climate change. But what was so interesting is what he's really saying is that if you take a space where people kind of cut off the outside world and they focus on the future, that their own mind has the answers to some of the questions that they're really asking about the future, and that they just don't normally think about it. And so that in some sense we have a little bit of a short-term version of the future in our minds that we just kind of don't talk about with ourselves, which I think is really fascinating. And he was a bit surprised that I, as a cold-hearted scientist, thought this was so interesting and that this could work. And so, I know that there's people who believe homeopathy being one of the examples of, potentially basically mind over matter. But, how much do these human factors, not just do people do what the doctor tell them, but, do they believe that they're going to get better?
Oh, the placebo effect's extraordinarily powerful.
Right.
If you don't allow for the placebo effect in your clinical trials or whatever, you're making a big mistake.
How do you allow for it? In other words, what's the model?
You give a placebo.
You just give a placebo.
Right, and sometimes you find that the treatment is no different or not much different than the placebo. And that's a tough thing to disentangle, right? Because we know that if you believe you're getting treatment, that has a profound effect on your response. Even, things like blood pressure. If you really believe this is a good treatment, you can imagine how physiologically your blood pressure.
I have a friend who has one of these fitness monitoring things, who you can watch her adjust her heart rate.
Yeah, you can do that.
She can stare at it and just adjust her heart rate. I can do it a little.
Yeah, I can make my blood pressure fall 20 points if I go into deeper levels of.
So we need a model of the human brain and how that works. So I have one last question. Have you ever played SimCity? Do you know what it is?
Yeah, I do. Once when my children were around.
Right.
We made it to The Sims.
But I don't play it much.
And so, well, what we're doing is I played with my freshmen last week, the freshman seminar students, and they couldn't believe that something that was a game was such a good teaching tool. Because you can, imagine, right, that you could have healthcare really
Well, there is Sim Health.
Yeah.
So the person who's coming to my house for Thanksgiving is the head of a foundation, and they've sponsored a lot of work on a simulation for community health.
Perfect. Is it called Sim Health?
No, it's called I can't remember what it's called.
Oh, we'll find out.
But I can definitely get it for you. And whether or not it's accurate is not the point.
Okay.
They give it, for example, to legislators in Georgia and say, let's just look at the options you have for policy change and what the impact will be.
Right.
And they have to be careful because
I'm sorry, you're giving a Sim City equivalent modeling system to politicians to give examples of modeling for doing different public policy for people, but it doesn't matter if it's accurate? Okay.
I don't think it's validated as being truly accurate and precise, but it sure makes people think about what would happen if we change these factors. So always worth
one of the things that we talk about in the seminar in particular is trying to explain that you can test.
This guy keeps saying things and making me go, what? I guess that's okay as long as it's, presented contextually, I guess.
These simulations. So, for example, climate change, if you take data for 1900 to 1950 and then you try to predict 1950 to 2000, you can actually check if you were right.
Well, it's basically bootstrapping is what we call it in decision analysis.
Right, and so I imagine somebody could do that with these health
I wish they would do
simulations.
more of it, but GE, I know, invested a fair amount in simulation of things going on in the hospital. It's definitely a tool that's going to be very useful. We just don't often have enough granular data to make the model work well.
But why wouldn't you just make an accurate one? Or is the goal that you're trying to make an accurate one, you just haven't succeeded yet? Like, I still stand by that. I absolutely 100% think that there should be an app that is a resource management game that is released for free to everyone on the fucking planet that uses real-time, real information of the policies would have to be run in the programming in the background, but uses the actual import, export, and monetary, and you would be able to do so many things and solve so many problems with just that much computing power and that many people mid-maxing the fuck out of resource management. We absolutely fucking should be doing that. And if you could make it global, that'd be incredible. Now, admittedly, this is what I'm saying is a lot easier said than done, right? Like, it's not exactly like what I'm describing may as well be rocket science. But like, you could definitively do it on like a country scale, right? You could, right? And like, you could take that data could be so fucking useful. So useful. You could do so much with it. Uh. Yeah, the CDC used the game Plague to get people to think about infection and mutation and prevention. Yeah, absolutely. You can definitely use games to make people think about something. I mean, I would even argue that there are a lot of games that's the intention. A game like Soma, for example, right? Soma is very much philosophy. So, like, I don't think that it's I do think that games are a great educating tool and are great to get people to think about things. But if you're there's a far cry between that and we're introducing this for policy purposes. Again, like I said, if you're doing that, as long as it's presented contextually in a way that's like, hey, this isn't accurate, but hey, maybe we should consider some of these policies and here's how they might play out. Yeah, sure. I guess that's fine. But that's why I mean, like, this guy keeps saying things that I keep going, what? Because it's like, I feel like there's context that's not forthcoming in some of the stuff that he's saying. But I mean, I get that's what happens in like casual, like these conversations, these interviews feel like they seem to me to be more casual conversation than they seem to be actually like an interview. Right? But that's just me. That's just me. All right, oh boy, I don't know how much more of this we have. We have expert conversation. We got the map, timeline, extra material, and then the assessment. So we're gonna do the map, the timeline, and extra material tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me this Tuesday. We should be done this one by the end of this week. Good job, everybody. On Wednesday, wait. No, I won't be doing this tomorrow. I'm going to be on Dapper's channel tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to have time for this tomorrow, so we might not be doing that tomorrow. We're going to find out, because I don't know what we're doing over on Dapper's channel tomorrow, so I'm going to be over there. And then, so maybe I'll do what I was going to do tomorrow on Friday, and then we have Dumpfuck Friday. And it's Halloween. So, thanks everybody. I'm going to get out of here. And I will see you on Dapper's channel tomorrow. Hooray! And thank you very much, Autumn, for your assessment and chat about and answering about chickenpox. So if you weren't watching, you should check out some of the comments going on the side. Gamification of political goals is highly philosophical and political issue. Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think using games to get people to think about stuff is a good idea. I mean, that was the whole push of making video games considered art, right? Art is about getting people to think about things and have an experience. And the games are the same thing. So, like, I don't know, it doesn't have to be every game, but, like, having that intention behind what you're doing. Like, yeah, I don't know, if Assassin's Creed was like, let's actually do a little bit of history or something like that. I don't fucking know. Anyway, I'm gonna, bye, see you later. Fine, God.